Welcome to today's Explainer. We're going to be diving deep into the hidden and honestly pretty fascinating complexities of translating tourism materials. You know, when you pick up a travel brochure or browse a hotel website, it usually feels totally seamless. But behind the scenes, well, as we're about to see, it's so much more than just swapping words between, say, English and Arabic. It's actually this incredible balancing act of language, culture, and even technology.
So here's our roadmap for this explainer. We'll start by unpacking the tourism experience itself. Then we'll jump into the actual linguistic hurdles translators face. After that, we'll navigate those tricky cultural divides, take a look at the technology tug-of-war happening right now, and finally, wrap things up with some winning translation strategies. Let's get right into it.
All right, starting things off with why translating the tourism experience is just uniquely difficult.
Now, there's a really fascinating paradox here. Think about it. The whole point, the ultimate goal of tourism translation is to provide incredibly engaging information to potential tourists, right? You want to excite them. You want them to book that trip. Yet, as the source material points out with this quote, this specific genre still gets a massive amount of criticism. Why is something meant to be so inviting, so notoriously difficult to get right?
Well, that brings us right to the root of the problem. The language of tourism doesn't just pull from one simple vocabulary list. It's basically a giant puzzle drawing from tons of different disciplines. A single paragraph in a travel guide might require the translator to perfectly understand geographical terms, local history, economic realities, and on top of all that, persuasive marketing copy. It's an absolutely crucial juggling act. And that's exactly why that travel guide you read might sometimes feel a bit clunky. Managing all those linguistic levels at once is insanely complex.
Moving right along, let's talk about overcoming those actual linguistic hurdles, because the language barrier itself is huge.
The really crucial point here is terminology and jargon. Tourism is literally packed with specialized terms that just do not have direct equivalents in other languages, especially when you're moving from English to Arabic. Take something super common like bed and breakfast. If you translate that literally word for word, it might sound like you're talking about a piece of furniture and a meal, and the whole concept of a cozy lodging completely vanishes. So translators are forced to abandon those literal translations. Instead, they use a descriptive approach, translating it to mean overnight stay and breakfast, so the true meaning actually lands.
And that perfectly illustrates our next linguistic trap, idiomatic expressions. Think about the phrase catching a flight. If you translate that literally into Arabic, it paints a very weird, frankly hilarious picture. Like you're physically running around with a butterfly net trying to catch an airplane. No way that works. Idioms absolutely must be carefully rephrased. The translator has to find a cultural equivalent that preserves the original intent, getting on an airplane on time, without sounding totally awkward or weirdly literal. Now, to truly grasp the sheer scale of this linguistic challenge, especially with Arabic, we have to talk about what a diglossic language is. Arabic is a language with numerous distinct regional dialects. This means translating a big tourism campaign into Arabic isn't just a simple one-size-fits-all solution. Far from it. What works perfectly in one country might be entirely confusing or even meaningless in another. Just look at how a simple, everyday word, like friend, drastically changes depending on the region of your target audience. In Egyptian Arabic, you'd say Sadiq, but shift over to Levantine Arabic, and suddenly it's Rafiq. Move to Maghdibi, or Moroccan Arabic, and it becomes Shub or Kuya. A translator has to be hyper-aware of these dialects. If you use the wrong dialect in a promotional campaign, you don't just risk a misunderstanding, you completely fail to build that crucial, welcoming connection with the tourist.
But hey, it's not just about the words. Let's navigate some cultural divides, because this goes way beyond vocabulary.
This adds an entirely new, deeply sensitive layer of complexity. Translators are basically in this constant cultural tug-of-war. They have to respect local norms. For instance, when translating menus or food tours for an Arabic audience, highlighting halal food is a must. They also need to ensure the visuals are culturally appropriate, like maybe avoiding big displays of alcohol in promotional materials where it might be seen as offensive. It's all about balancing adaptation, actually changing the content to fit local customs, with localization, making it feel familiar and accessible, while still keeping the true essence of the destination intact.
And then, oh boy, there's humor. Talk about a cultural minefield. Humor is notoriously tough to translate. The source material gives this great example. A tourist says they wanted a super relaxing vacation, so they booked a tour with action-packed adventures. And, quote, turns out they weren't kidding. The humor there relies entirely on the irony of wanting to relax but getting non-stop action.
Preserving that lighthearted irony of an English joke requires highly specific, localized phrasing in Arabic. Otherwise, the punchline falls totally flat and just sounds like a confusing statement of fact.
Let's pivot a bit and look at the tools of the trade in what we're calling the technology tug-of-war.
These days, there is a huge dependence on computer-assisted translation, or CAT tools. And yeah, they massively boost efficiency, for sure. But they have major blind spots. They often completely stumble when it comes to capturing that context and those cultural nuances we just talked about. They literally cannot compute idioms. Plus, the tourism industry is incredibly dynamic. Terminology is constantly evolving. Think about the sudden explosion of terms like sustainable tourism. Translators have to continuously train these software systems so the output stays relevant and culturally sensitive.
All right, so how do they actually pull it off? Let's open up the translator's toolkit and look at some winning strategies.
To actually succeed, the pros utilize this specific 5-step toolkit. First up, cultural sensitivity training helps them really step into the tourist's shoes. Second, they collaborate heavily with local experts and native speakers to guarantee absolute authenticity. Third, they absolutely leverage technology, but, and this is key, always with strict human oversight to catch those weird, nuanced errors. Fourth, they prioritize contextual translation. They move away from literal, dry, technical details and use vivid, descriptive language that captures the actual vibe of the experience. And finally, they rely on continuous tourist feedback to spot weaknesses and improve.
As we wrap up today's explainer, I think it's pretty clear that tourism translation isn't just swapping words. It's an incredible art form that blends sharp linguistics with really deep cultural empathy. So I'm going to leave you with this real-world challenge drawn straight from the source material. Look at the phrase, home away from home. If you were the translator, how would you capture that highly specific, warm, cozy feeling in a completely different language, without falling into the trap of a clunky, literal translation? It's a perfect reminder of the beautiful, complex bridges these professionals have to build every single day. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.